everyone. We have Professor Timothy Kircher today with us, whom I call Tim. This is the first time I'm meeting Tim on Zoom. We've had conversations a couple of times about our interventions in the humanities. Professor Timothy Kircher is head professor of history, and he was the chair of humanities division at Guilford College for 8 years, and currently the editor of humanities-watch.org. Tim, it's so nice to have you and such a privilege to have you today with us to talk about your intervention in the humanities. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Well, thank you for having me, Thelina. Thelini, it's an honor to be here. I've enjoyed your show, and I'm grateful to be part of it.
Thank you very much. Tim, we'll proceed with our discussion by talking about, first of all, your academic and research engagement as a professor of history and as a historian, and then we could move on to sort of discuss about your website. Tell us a little bit to our audience and the viewers about the kind of work that you do as an academic.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, my research is centered mainly on Italian Renaissance humanism and literature and philosophy. So I study what people used to call the history of ideas, and they sometimes call it intellectual history now.
Yeah.
The name of the field keeps changing. And I'm very interested in looking at the interplay among different fields of knowledge and different forms of expression, whether it be in literature or in philosophy or in pedagogy, in classical emulation, the emulation of classical texts, which Renaissance humanists were known for. So that's really my research field. I've studied humanists ranging from 14th century humanists like Francesco Petrarch and Giovanni Boccaccio, then into the 16th century. So that's what I like to research and write about.
Right. What made you interested in the humanities in the first place? Why do you want to be a scholar in the humanities?
Oh, right. Yes. Well, like probably many of our listeners and viewers, I entered the field gradually. I went to college uncertain of what I might study. I had a wide background training in high school here and in the United States. It's not unusual to go to university without having chosen a particular discipline in which to specialize. And my interest gravitated eventually towards history through probably through the mentoring of some professors that I really enjoyed studying with. And I just stayed with it. I spent what's called my junior year, which is my third year in college. I spent overseas in Germany and studied at the University of Freiburg. And that intensified my interest in the history of ideas and religion, and then came back and continued.
Right. So you do this. You're the force, you're the incredible force behind the humanities-watch.org, which is a website dedicated to sort of explore the connection between the humanities and the STEM, right? The business, healthcare, science, technology, like the website says.
Yeah.
We'll give a brief introduction to your website, and then we will discuss what inspired you to sort of engage in this.
That sounds great. Okay. Oh, so I'll give the introduction. I'm happy to give the introduction. Thank you. Well, I developed this website about 5 years ago. As you mentioned, I was chair of humanities here at Guilford College in North Carolina. We are a small private arts, liberal arts college, and 1,500, 1,600 students. And at an age the size of our place, we are very interdisciplinary. I teach courses, for example, also for English majors and religious studies majors and interdisciplinary studies. And when I would go to talk to my colleagues at other institutions, I heard quite often, this is now 5, 6, 7 years ago, about the crisis in the humanities, how fields are changing. The fields in which I entered my academic career are also not as, let us say, not as fertile, not as widespread as they were when I entered.
Mm-hmm.
And I began thinking about what is it that distinguishes the humanities from other fields, whether it's social sciences, natural sciences, but particularly what distinguishes what is the relationship between the humanities and what, in my own words, I called our current energy centers. And those energy centers being, well, that's where the energy and the focus is, the energy of business, technology, healthcare, science. And to me, the humanities are always about a conversation, a dialogue, and language. And I wanted to create a website that explored that relationship, that explored that dialogue that the humanities had with these other fields. And so the leading question on the website is a leading question that can culture help us live well? And the direct impetus for it is from Dostoevsky's novel, The Devils, where one of the speakers, he's antagonized. He's an older gentleman, and he gets up in front of a crowd and he says, "What's more important, Pushkin or petroleum, Shakespeare or a pair of boots?" And I thought that question that Dostoevsky was asking in the 19th century was more relevant than ever.
Absolutely. So, absolutely.
That's what my website explores the question, the debate, and it provides information from all, I hope, from as many perspectives as possible, including those who don't see the humanities as important. Excuse me.
What kind of inspired you to do this? Because you said you started this 5 years ago, and you're already a professor of history and you have extensive experience as an academic. So what made you sort of reach out and start this website, at a time very crucial to both of us, to both our contexts?
Because I found it absolutely vital for the survival of the humanities. And one of the truisms I carry around in my mind, which I might provoke you with, is the future of the humanities lies outside the humanities. And what I mean by that is that, okay, you agree, good. What I mean is that there are people, our colleagues in the sciences, in business, in technology, in healthcare, often see the value of the humanities in ways that are incredibly important for them, very exciting and very important for them. And they have a lot even to teach us about why the humanities are important. And we have a lot to engage with them about how we can help them improve their expertise in their chosen fields. So I felt that it was very vital to have that conversation instead of looking at us in C.P. Snow's famous book, The Two Cultures, and sort of staring at each other across this divide. But there are many bridges to be built, and that exist. Actually, that exist.
While I also seek the possibility and of rich conversations among different disciplines like science and technology, medicine, do you think there is a history of the humanities being used as a very functional discipline or functional field in the medicine or in the science and technology, just to just kind of as an emotional supplement, but not as a full-fledged field? Do you think what do you think about it?
Well, I would agree that there's so much more that needs to be done. And there is a way people have tried to articulate the importance of the humanities by saying, well, they offer skills. And it's true. There's nothing wrong with that position. I agree with that position, but I also think there are ways of knowing which underlie those skills, which are even more fundamental and can be developed and must be developed. I mean, it's not even a question of can, it's a question of must. And so, yes, so there's sometimes the humanities are used in a very instrumental way, an ancillary way. Well, it's medicine plus humanities, it's business plus humanities. To me, that's a starting point. To me, hey, we've engaged the conversation, but it doesn't end there. But if we can have that plus, we can turn that into more of what I see as a unity. I believe very strongly that the humanities offer us a path to conceiving what I would call wholeness. And to me, wholeness underlies health. And so how do you have health in medicine without a sense of wholeness, which the humanities can provide? And thus, we have our colleagues very active in the medical humanities, in narrative medicine. These are incredibly important developments that deserve our support and deserve our participation, actually. More than our support, we need to participate in these endeavors.
Absolutely. So talking a bit more about your website, the humanitieswatch.org. Do you also think, like you mentioned just now, the future of the humanities is outside the field itself? So, do you think we can have a very productive discussion on the humanities, or kind of, a good academic or kind of a conversation about the humanities in these informal kind of spaces? I'm using informal within quotes. Do you think there is more possibility for discussions to emerge in these spaces, like in a non-institutional kind of spaces? Like
they must. They have to.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, that may be the first step. So that if we can talk to colleagues about their interests in art, literature, history, philosophy, ethics, whether that's part of philosophy, religious study, however we want to define the humanities. And then we can learn from them and they can learn from us. Every doctor who sits with a patient and has to talk to that patient about a very difficult moment, maybe a diagnosis, they're engaged in communication in ways that are very, very profound, life-changing. And there is where the humanities are present.
Right.
They're present. You don't have to be a disciplinarian about it. You can, as Rita Charon says, who teaches both in the English department and the medical school of Columbia University, she says when a doctor is with a patient, they share a very fundamental bond that transcends everything else. It transcends gender, race, class, ethnicity, religious difference, and that's the bond of mortality. That's a very profound bond, that we're mortal animals. We're not just rational animals, we're mortal animals. And so in that moment, there's a very human connection, which I would define to be really almost at the core of the humanities. It's understanding who we are and using the medium of language, which I think is the fundamental basis for the humanities. Is using the medium of language to express what we know, and I mean know not just intellectually but also emotionally and spiritually. So yes, I think we need to have informal conversations. I think, as I was suggesting earlier, I think many people in the fields of technology, science, they are very interested in those sorts of things as they proceed through their lives. We're all historical beings. We think about our history all the time, where we came from, who we're with, what moment we're living in. Now we're living in a health crisis. What does that mean? What is health? What is crisis? And how do we understand that?
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping that those conversations will be fostered and developed and enrich us and make us healthier by making us whole.
This is a time when the humanities is most, I think most crucial. We are currently in the midst of a pandemic, and sometimes probably the humanities as a field would have been pushed to the background, but I think in relation to certain functions, but I think this is a time we could use the humanities, or the necessity of the humanities is felt more than before. We see the rise of fascist politics. We see, cut downs on like freedom of speech and everything. How do you want to think about humanities and its importance, especially in a context like this, especially at a time like this?
Yes, that's a very great question. Well, one of my studying Renaissance humanism, and one of my favorite authors is I belong to an organization called the American Boccaccio Association. So
Okay.
a number of our listeners will know of Giovanni Boccaccio. He begins his most famous work, the Decameron, with a description of the 1348 plague, the bubonic plague that struck Florence, killing anywhere from estimates 30 to 50% of the population in the period of about 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
So much more devastating than what we're experiencing. But there's been a revived interest in Boccaccio because of the pandemic right now, and trying to learn about his response to it. And that goes to the social, the political, the cultural response to this devastating outbreak. So one of the ways that humanities can help us, we can learn from reading literature with fresh eyes. Great literature is never old. These authors are elders. They always have something to tell us. They carry myths that are infinitely deep. And every country, every people, every society has its myths that we can go back to and learn from again and again and again, whether it's a Greek myth or an Indian myth or wherever it might be, Chinese. And we can learn from these authors. And with regard to the pandemic, I think a lot about the meaning of public health, as I was suggesting earlier. And there's a famous quotation from Cicero, salus publica suprema lex, which means the public, literally often translated as the public health, is the supreme law or the supreme mandate. And it's a motto that's on buildings and around the United States and health departments and so on.
Okay.
But what is health? So the Roman word salus, she was a deity, but it also comes from the Greek word holos, which means whole. So public welfare, public wholeness is the supreme mandate. And the World Health Organization, in its mission statement, actually doesn't just talk about medical health, it talks about well-being, it talks about wholeness. And so the humanities, you talk about restrictions, right? The loss of liberties that can emerge at a time of crisis. Well, the humanities can address those head on. Culture is always the watchword, is always the watcher. This was a saying of the great German historian Jakob Burckhardt in the 19th century. He said that culture is always the watcher into restrictions on liberty, be they through religion, be they through political means. And so the humanities have a really critical role to play in reminding us of wholeness that science doesn't always see. Science may only address our biology, our physical health, but we also know the tremendous cost in mental health that people have suffered, the emotional cost, even not through the illness directly, but maybe through loss of job, loss of opportunities, loss of income, all those crises that have untold, still untold dimensions. So the humanities, again, have a lot, they're a storehouse for us to draw upon and to watch over, because they guard language for us, and so we must guard the humanities. Because like to me, humanities are the guardians of language, and so we must be the guardians of the humanities. And so the motto of my website,
I was just looking at it.
Who watches the Watchmen, right? It's from Juvenal, one of the satires, Juvenal. And so, you know, who watches the Watchers? Who watches the Watchmen? And it's meant to say, we need to look at ourselves. If people that we perceive to be opposed to the humanities or ignorant of the humanities are somehow restricting us, well, we need to also look to our own responsibility and our own response to that restriction, and we need to take it upon ourselves to speak out and to be in conversation, to be in conversation with people. Right. And that's why I started the website. I think we need to have that conversation.
Tim, there's a conversation between two things. For example, some people think that the humanities should be reinvented to fit the job market, the current economy, so that graduates could be more employable. But some think no. The humanities, the function of the humanities is not exactly the opposite. The function of the humanities is to nurture critical thinking people, students who think critically, act critically, who try to engage in radical world-making practices. Where do you place yourself and your interventions in these two, two waves?
Yes. Well, it might not surprise you that I reject that as a false choice. In other words, the humanities embraces both.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be an either or. Of course, the humanities give us incredibly valuable skills. I mean, look at the head of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, who reads philosophy, quotes Nietzsche at his company meetings, deeply learned in the humanities. Many CEOs have a deep understanding of the humanities. And so there's a recent study from the British Academy of Arts and Sciences, it's on my website, which claims, based on data. Now, this is something that people who like data in the social sciences want to see, that actually the incomes of humanities majors are nearly equivalent to the incomes of science majors, with the sole exception of those employed as doctors and dentists. They skew the curve, which is to say, humanities, being a humanities major, this is the British Academy, at least for the UK, and there are similar studies for the United States, does not put you at any economic disadvantage, which is often the claim against the humanities. We're economically disadvantaged if we major in the humanities. We are not as employable. We are going to learn less income. This is the argument that's going on in Australia with devastating results, with doubling the fees for humanities majors in Australia, which you know. So we need to, we have data. We have data that supports the view that the humanities offer lifelong skills. As historians, you're an historian. I know you're studying English literature, but we talked about your deep interest in history. And as historians, we know that one of the things history prepares us for are for events like the COVID-19, for the unexpected. We are humanities majors, or people well-versed in the humanities, that are majors in the humanities, understand that life has its ups and downs, that life has its reversals. This goes back to if I go back with my students to archaic lyric poetry from Greece, where the archaic poets are talking about this. All life is ups and downs, according to Archilochus. And so we can understand that we need to be mobile and flexible. On the other hand, the other choice you're talking about, being radically critical, the humanities nurture that too.
Yeah.
And so one person can be both. You can go into a job field and reimagine your field. You can be radical in that field. You can be employed in a way where you see an opening where now you want to reimagine how that is done through a critical lens, and how money is earned, is employing people ethically, distributing wealth in maybe in a way that you consider to be much more just and equitable in terms of social justice. And you can be successful in that field. It's not, so to me, it's not an either or. It's a both. It encompasses both, because the humanities get us to think in the round. They get us to think about the wholeness of things. So that's where I come down. We do have skills, but it's not simply instrumentalist. We're not just being instrumentalist about it.
I have a couple of questions about your website, but before moving on to that, just let me touch a little bit more on the humanities, the aspect of funding. At least in the USA right now, how do the humanities scholars, probably international scholars and the domestic scholars, both equally, what kind of funding opportunities are there? Has it expanded, or has it shrunk? How has it evolved?
Yeah. Yes, well, that's a good question, and I'm afraid I don't have a clear answer for you on that. I think that job opportunities in the academic fields, in terms of the professoriate, that they have diminished largely in the humanities field. There are still many different fellowship agencies out there. There are humanities centers. I was a fellow at the National Humanities Center here in North Carolina. Stanford has a humanities center. The Institute for Advanced Learning, for Advanced Studies in Princeton. I mean, there are these well-established agencies that are deeply invested in supporting humanities research. And I don't think that their funds have diminished. As a matter of fact, we have new humanities centers being developed all the time, some of them with direct application to the sciences. I think there's one at Virginia Tech, Virginia Technical Institute, which has that orientation. Georgetown University is developing a humanities center right now. It's still in the planning stages. So there are new opportunities for funding. I don't have I'm not, as somebody in the humanities, I'm not quantitatively oriented enough to actually give you a figure, but the National Endowment for the Humanities in the United States is still well funded. It's of course subject to government budgets. It's often threatened with reduction in funds, but that has not happened under any administration, no matter the political party. So we do have both public money, let us say federal public money, as well as private money, like the Mellon Foundation. The Tagle Foundation is also been very generous in, again, studying the applications of liberal arts more generally to science, to business fields, and to reimagine the way that the humanities are taught in the curriculum. They have a new initiative called the Cornerstone Project devoted to that. So there are new initiatives, but I think overall there's also a decreased job openings across our country. It's mixed.
Talking about your digital intervention, how do you think the use of the algorithm to create a space for discussion? Using the digital space, the algorithms, for a discussion on the humanities. What are the implications of this, and how is it? Yeah.
It's a learning curve, isn't it, Feline?
You
and I are both learning a lot.
Oh,
but
yes.
we would have never met without the algorithm.
Absolutely.
So we can be grateful to Twitter that that's how we cross paths.
Yeah.
And I never thought I would have to think about search engine optimization before I started my website, but I do. And so it's difficult. I think that for us in the humanities, we're not, unless we have a background in computer coding or computer technology, we don't instinctively think about the algorithmic implications of our publications, be it the podcast or be it in print. But now we do, and so we think of metadata. We think about keywords. We think about these things, and all I can say is it's to think of McLuhan. The medium is the message. It's not the whole message, but the medium certainly shapes the message. And one of the things I try to do with my website, which I think what you're doing very well with your podcast, is to still have a space for the long story. And not just the soundbite, not just the 5 or 10 or 15 second soundbite. So we're using the medium to, in a way, change the medium, expand the medium, enrich the medium, and that's what I'm trying to do with my website. I have original content that I create. I have quotes. I have some videos. I have news posts, and so it's a way of I hope enriching the medium so that when people are looking for news about the humanities, they have a place to go to that isn't just the latest article in Forbes or the latest editorial in the New York Times or the Washington Post. It's that those are there, but also there's quotes from thinkers like Tagore, whom I'm always going back to.
Right.
Incredibly profound. What he was saying 100 years ago still is incredibly relevant for us today. And just to mention one, or Irvin Chargaff, who was a brilliant chemist but also philosopher. And these are thinkers who understood that relationship between science and the humanities very well, or business and the humanities in some cases. So I think the algorithm is important. It's here. The algorithm is here. What's important, if I can just expand on this one more time, you and I talked about this a little bit earlier. It's important to escape the bubble. And what algorithms will tend to do is link us with people who think like us. And therefore we have, again, as you and I care about language, I don't even like this idea of friending someone or liking someone. So just on the basis of a headline.
Absolutely.
But we need to get into conversation with people who may not agree with us. That's where real conversation can take place. Somebody who says, wait a minute, why are the humanities important at all? Why would it's useless. This is, I think, a really rich area of discussion, which you addressed on your podcast and I addressed on my website, is this idea of the humanities being useless. What's the use of the useless? Very, very, it's a very rich discussion, which the Taoists talked about, Zhuangzi and others, many, many years ago, and still quite important for us today.
Absolutely. Tim, you're also very active in public writing. You take a lot of time and effort to write on platforms such as Medium, and to engage in discussions. One of the criticisms leveled against the academics is that their writing is very inapproachable, and it's difficult to sort of trace what kind of ideas they express. And public writing kind of serves as a mode to sort of fill this gap. How do you see public writing as an intervention to talk with the humanities, to talk about the humanities, and have you find this effective?
Have I found it effective? Well, I guess that's not for me to say. I have found it necessary. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And there are many colleagues out there doing this, from Jill Lepore to Anthony Grafton, to many others, really too numerous to mention, that are engaged in this public sphere. And there are many ways to express yourself in the public sphere. There are long form pieces that, say, Anthony Grafton writes. Wrote one recently on his mentor, Arnaldo Mobiliano, on tablet, but also in the New York Review of Books. Jill Lepore writes regularly for the New Yorker. There is the site The Conversation, which you may be familiar with, which is really designed to have academics talk about important subjects in a more accessible way. And so The Conversation is again, it's a website blog that does important service. There are editorials that one can write for the newspaper. As you say, I publish some of my things on Medium as well as on my website. I think it can be frustrating because it's time consuming. And I think one of the challenge for us as academics is we have a lot on it. We may look lazy, but we're not lazy. We're very busy. In other words, to our critics, we're just, they live an incredible life of leisure. But actually, we're very busy all the time. And what advances our careers in one respect may not be seen as advancing our careers in another respect. Not that I mean like academic publishing advances our careers in one way, but public writing needs to be recognized at institutions in other ways, which it's really hasn't been well established yet, those criteria, recognizing more public writing. But I think it's really important for us as scholars because it enriches, it's a dialogue. It enriches our scholarship. This is what I would tell people who, like you and me and others who say, well, I don't have the time. I would say it's good for your writing. It's good for your academic writing. It's good to think clearly. And I'm the first to say, no draft is ever finished. And I as painful as criticism is, it's invaluable when people say, I don't understand what you're saying. So we always need to think about language. Again, going back to that central mission, when the Renaissance humanists formulated the Studia Humanitatis, the 5 major subjects were language-based: rhetoric, grammar, poetry, history, philosophy. They're all really rooted in an understanding of language. So we need to take the time as much as we can, even in conversations like this podcast. What you're doing, as I said before, is incredibly important. More people should be doing it. There are TED Talks. Are they, you're familiar with TED Talks? And they're global now. Do you know what TED stands for?
No, it skips my mind.
Technology, entertainment, and design. Nothing about the humanities. About the humanities, but they're talks. And that is the humanities. So now they don't explain the acronym anymore. But the original acronym was technology, entertainment, design. And there's opportunities to give talks in those fora. So yeah, it's important. I think it's necessary.
Before we kind of wind up the discussion, I have one more question to you. People like students, the new generation of students who are interested in the humanities, and all the young historians out there. How do you want to sort of inspire them in pursuing their endeavors, especially, and the need to do more informal kind of conversations, dialogues, in order to talk about the humanities. What do you have to say to them, if I may?
Yeah. Okay. I'll try to be brief. Well, follow your dream. the future is uncertain, and by that very fact, it's not certain that you will not find a career in the academy if that's what you want. When I was writing my doctorate 40 years ago, whenever it was, I have to do the math quickly, 35 years ago, whatever it was, I was told there were no jobs. Why am I in graduate school? Does that sound familiar? That's the refrain that many graduate students hear today. But I didn't care, really. I wanted to write my dissertation. I wanted to explore those ideas. That was what was important to me. It's almost a once in a lifetime opportunity to do it. So do it. If you're passionate about it, do it. And then in terms of the informal engagement, well, that's what you and I are doing. I mean, this is, again, I want to thank you for your initiative. I think you are opening up new opportunities for people to see the value of the humanities through your creativity.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, but it's true, and you are inspiring people by taking this on. And so with the technology nowadays, there's many ways for people to get involved and have a conversation, and reach out to other people and reach across to people who may not understand what we do, and ask why they don't understand, and learn from that response, and help ourselves as we try to help others.
Great. Tim, before we wind up, any final remarks, any final thoughts that you would like to add? Probably that I could not ask you. You could say.
I just want to say again that conversation, dialogue is what marks out our space in the humanities. And scientists have recognized this, thoughtful scientists, thoughtful business people, thoughtful people in technology. We carry ourselves with language. We need to pay attention to language. We need to value each other's language. And we need to really consider language as a treasure. It can teach us so much about our lives, what we know and what we don't know. Enter that field of ignorance, as Socrates told us to do. So that's all I would say.
Thank you, Tim. It was wonderful to have you today, and your initiative is such an inspiring thing for a lot of people. I hope I will post the link of your website, and people can log in and have a look, and engage. They can engage with the content. They can read the content. They can share their ideas, thoughts with you. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for being so appreciative of the initiative, and I'm glad that we met and that we share mutual interest in talking about the humanities and engaging with it at a more deeper level. Thank you once again. We will meet soon. We'll have this conversation going, and I wish you all the best for all your endeavors.
Thank you, Thalini. I see this as the first of many conversations between us.
Yes.